and welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. In the world of creative expression and communication, the ability to take a single skill and apply it across different mediums might be considered a superpower. This skill diversification not only broadens horizons, but also allows the writer, for instance, to navigate diverse landscape with ease. From igniting conversations and shaping public opinion, to crafting compelling campaigns that influence consumer choices, to taking imaginations on a fictional journey through pages of created worlds, today's guest has done it all. RJ Post is a writer and author, a musician, a digital content creator, and he's here to talk about using his skill set in diverse capacities. We'll also chat about his experience self-publishing his upcoming novel, Phantoms in the Field House. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome RJ to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. I'm excited. All right. There are a lot of things that we get to talk about today, but first, just tell us a little bit about yourself and let us get to know you.
Well, I've been actually a storyteller longer than even I could write. My first experience with storytelling that I can recall was copying cartoons out of the daily newspaper with, we all had those little watercolor sets when we were kids, copying those out of the newspaper and then actually delivering them to houses in my neighborhood. My older brother had a paper route, and I think I was thinking, I could do that, So it goes back a long way for me. And then spent 31 years working for newspapers in Kansas and Nebraska as a reporter, an editor, and a manager. And then 6 years ago, switched into the marketing field and do all sorts of things there. Basic things you might expect, like writing radio and television commercials for cars, to writing things for websites, to writing things like scavenger hunt clues and limericks. I was asked to do that a couple of times. Once I was asked to write the titles of dishes being served at a birthday party and then to describe them and to give all of that an agricultural twist. So done lots and lots of different things like that. And then, as of past 3 years, writing books. I've got 2 short story collections out there that are all sorts of genres: mystery, romance, thriller, humor, paranormal, that kind of thing. And then the book that I have out now is the first in a series of YA mysteries that you mentioned earlier, Phantoms in the Field House.
That's amazing. And I love how you took this one skill of well, I guess technically 2 skills, because storytelling in and of itself is a skill. Because there are some people, even just sitting and listening to them recount their day, you're going, this is not very interesting, or, it doesn't hold your attention.
Yes,
so,
true.
You know what I'm saying? And so, storytelling and writing, because to put story, verbally told stories into words on paper is completely different as well. So to take these skills of storytelling and writing and merging them in so many different arenas, like, that is pretty impressive. Like, do you find that these areas complement each other, or do you have to say, okay, my brain is in journalism here, it's in marketing here, it's in fiction writing here? How does that work?
Well, where writing's concerned in particular, you just have to learn not only to write in different genres, but in different voices. For instance, in journalism, you learn fairly early on the difference between writing what we used to call straight news, that straight up story. There was a car accident at 5th and Main today. And, these were the people injured. This is how it happened. And writing a feature, and which is more of a softer, usually longer news story. And there are different kinds of those too. There are what we used to call the light and bright, about the boy that saved a cat out of a tree or whatever he did, or the lady with the 3-legged cat, or personality profile. Like, for instance, if I was to write a story about you and your podcast, I would try to learn more things about you personally and about your background and how that got you into the podcast and how you do things differently with your podcast than maybe some other people do. And an old-fashioned newspaper term for a kind of story was a sob sister. I remember reading about this when I was in college and I was studying journalism. I never heard anyone in my career use that expression that the story you're writing is a sob sister. If we were talking about a movie or a novel, we might say a tearjerker, something that's sentimental, that plucks at the heartstrings, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So you have those different types of writing, even in one thing like journalism. And when we get into marketing, every client has their own voice. You have to understand what the voice of that business or organization is. We have one client that their voice is very technical and authoritative. They really want to be the authority in their line of manufacturing. So that's one voice. We have another client who is very heavy on relationships because they're a family-owned business and because they really hit on the fact that they built their business one relationship at a time. So very much on that one-to-one relationship with the client. That's their voice. We have a number of hospitals that are clients. So obviously they want to be authoritative, but they want to be welcoming and warm. So you have to learn what the client's voice is and speak in that voice. We have another client that an expression that we use is that he's like the person at the barbecue that wants to welcome everybody and has a good sense of humor. And so think about dad jokes when you think about what his voice is. So you have to learn to write in those different voices. And so that's how you approach that.
And I guess that makes sense because you do the same thing and you mentioned writing different genres, like when you're writing fiction, you have a different voice for all of your characters. Each story has its own theme, its own tone, and that kind of thing. So you just kind of have to be able to switch between all of those different voices in your head. Have you ever felt them like bleed over into one another where you're like, ooh, that might sound a little too journalistic as opposed to like a fiction novel or anything like that?
Well, that happens sometimes. Um, a lot of times when you're writing something for marketing, it's a little bit salesy, you know, because that's what the client wants. But then perhaps for the same client, maybe you're going to write a press release, and then I've got to dig out my reporter hat and put that on and try to make it sound a little more journalism kind of style, a little more straight to the facts and less sales oriented. Um, I heard Ricardo Montalban in an interview once. He was talking about Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, and he got the script and he was reading it. And when he first started reading it, he thought, this sounds a little too much like Mr. Rourke from Fantasy Island. And so he went back and he watched the original episode a few times, and he picked up the script again and he started reading it and he said, now that's Khan. Now I've got Khan dialed in. So sometimes, yeah, one of those things might bleed over a little bit. And then, you have to go back and delete and take another run at it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so you've written several books and this is like your Phantoms, was it Phantoms of the Field in the Field House? Is that your
Mm-hmm.
latest or is that just, one of many?
Well,
Tell us
that's
about your
that's
writing.
that's the latest one. My
Okay.
first two books were both short story collections. So 12 in the first book, 15 in the second book. The second book, I actually decided to uh, group all the stories in by length. So there were 5 different groups. Each one had a 5-minute, a 10-minute, and a 20-minute read. I came up with that idea to help people that like to read but don't necessarily have a lot of time.
That's
Like, for
smart.
instance, a busy mom, or even somebody who's waiting at the airport to take off or to pick someone up. I think I've got about 20 minutes. I'll read this one. Um, but the newest one is a novel, so it's all one story. And I'm calling it a YA mystery, but I've had readers, retired people that have read it and really enjoyed it too. So one of the things we say in marketing is you got to pick your audience and know it. You can't say your product is for everybody because then
Right.
it's not for anybody. But so I pitch it as a YA mystery because that's the age of the characters. But a lot of people anyone really that loves mysteries will enjoy it. So it's the first in what's going to be a series. I'm well into the second book and doing the research on the third one in that series.
That's awesome. So switching from short story to long form novel, was that a challenge to just be able to come up with all of the words, or did you just find your rhythm and just go with it?
Well, it was a challenge. When I was writing the short stories, I frequently found that, I can tell a good story in 5,000 words, or I've written some that were 500 words. I can tell a good story in that amount. If you watch some of the old programs on television, like from the 50s, something they used to have was 30-minute dramas. You'd never see that on television
Mm-mm,
today. You
mm-mm.
can go back and watch some of those shows. They'll tell a better story in 30 minutes than a lot of movies tell in 2 hours, you know. So that's one kind of skill. So then trying to take that and make a 50,000, or a lot of books are 100,000, 500,000 words. Um, yeah, you have to take a different approach. One thing we used to say in journalism is you erect a pup tent differently than a cathedral. So you have to think about, I'm erecting a cathedral here. I can take longer to describe something. I can use more dialogue, you know, and then tell more about the characters that way through their word choices. Um, the book that I have out now is actually based on characters that I introduced in a short story. So
Mhm.
it's a completely different story. But again, it's taking, I told the story with these three teenagers in 5,000 words. Now I'm going to do it in 50,000 words. So it's a different pace, and you have time for, more dialogue, more description, more anecdotes. Um, when you're writing something like adventure or thriller or mystery, it's kind of all about getting your characters in trouble and out of trouble. So find more ways to get them in trouble and imagine how they're going to get out of it.
Okay. Yeah, see, I have this problem where my editor says, Jennifer, 140,000 words is too many. It needs to be way fewer, and you need to
Oh,
cut words. And
mm-hmm,
I'm like,
mm-hmm.
I'm very attached to my words that I have chosen. And so short story writing is not something like I have tried to write short stories. I have tried to like take my characters and give them little side adventures, and I don't do that well. I need all of the words, and I don't know if that's a difference between female creative brain and male creative brain, because we always have more words as it is, or I don't know, but I struggle on the other end of it, saying, okay, so I did cut out like 10,000 words, but then I added 4,000 back, and she was not thrilled, but she was like, okay, they were good words. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, a couple of points there. One thing I certainly learned as an editor for newspapers was to eliminate excess words. You may have heard Mark Twain say that writing is easy. You just go through and mark out the wrong words, just cross them out. And I usually found that even in a well-written story, I could shorten a story by 10% without really eliminating any of the content. So you really get to be practiced at looking for those words that aren't your friend, like prepositions, or like adjectives and adverbs. Every time you use an adjective, you ask yourself, am I using the right noun? You know, every time you're using an adverb, am I using the right verb? You know, because there's a lot of ways to say run,
Mhm.
and am I using the right word for that? That's going to eliminate the need for that adjective or adverb. So that's, those little things that you go through and you look to do that you can tighten things up. Um, but also too, you've heard that expression, you must kill your darlings. Have you heard that?
Yes.
Frequently attributed to William Faulkner,
Yes, I
although it
have.
goes back further than him. And one of the things in marketing, there is this, he's deceased now, but this great advertising guru, David Ogilvy. And if you're ever interested in learning anything about marketing or advertising, I would highly recommend his two books. you would read those for pleasure. They're full
Really?
of so many clever little observations and anecdotes and whatnot. But one of his rules of thumb is the only true measure of the quality of an advertisement is if it sells, right? It doesn't make any difference how clever it is or how creative it is if it doesn't sell. So your words have to do their work, you know? And as much as you love that one description of the Gothic cathedral that the hero or heroine is about to walk into, if it's not really carrying its weight, maybe that's one of those darlings that you have to kill off.
That's true. I actually read a book. I was reading it. Yeah, I finished it yesterday, and it was a fluffy read. It wasn't something that I was really, getting into. But what kept pulling me from the story as the reader was she literally described the guy's scent like, I don't know, I would say 4 to 5 times in the book, and it was exactly the same every time. And I was like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, I've already,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm going, this could have been, you could have saved. Now, granted, it was probably 5 or 6 words, but one, it pulled me from the story, and two, it was repetitive and unnecessary. Once you've told me what he smells like all the time, I don't need you to tell me every time he walks into the room. And so, things like that, you have to kind of be careful and be aware of.
Right, right. Um, that's the kind of thing I sometimes wonder, maybe early on in the book, I describe a character. And by the time we get halfway through the book, 2/3 of the way through the book, is the reader still going to remember what that character looks like, let's say, you know? And so I try to drop little hints in without going into another full blown description, another data dump about, her long blonde hair or her glasses or whatever it is, um, and maybe just make some quick reference to kind of remind people, oh yeah, that's what she looks like. That's who this character is, as opposed to another one.
Yeah, I'm thinking if his scent changed, let us know. But otherwise, I'm good. Because one, I don't
Right.
picture scents. Like I'm not experienced. When you're telling me how somebody in a book smells, I'm going, I smell my Kindle. Like I don't really get into that part of the senses. It's weird. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it was one of those things that it makes you kind of aware. And I think as a writer, it's good to be a reader because it makes you aware of those kinds of things that you might
Right.
not want to do in
Right.
your
Right.
own
Right.
writing. And so I make it a point to read a book a week minimum. That's kind of where I
Well, you're
am.
doing better than I am, but I'm usually reading 2 or 3 at a time. So different
Yes.
kinds of books all at the same time. I read a book, I don't know, about a year ago. It was sort of a not a police procedural, but it was, a mystery. Police officer is the hero. There's a love interest, that kind of thing. Um, at any rate, the author all the time was talking about, somebody pauses, right? He says something, then there's a pause. She says something or whatever, she responds. And he was forever saying, she paused for several moments and then did whatever. And every time I read that, I thought, okay, how long is a moment? You can count those. There are several. As we're waiting, well, that's one moment that's gone by. Let's see, we're up to 6 moments now. I mean, that's an indefinite amount of time. It's short, but it's indefinite. We know how long a minute is. It's 60 seconds. But how long is a moment? It really got annoying after a while. I wish
It
some
does.
editor would have said to him, can you mix it up a little bit? Say she paused for a minute or she took a breath or
She
something.
hesitated. Yeah, like
Right.
mix it
Yeah.
up a little
Yeah.
bit.
Hmm. Right.
Which leads me to say, and it's something I probably 95% of the shows that I have, the interviews that I have done, we have all agreed your best investment is going to be a good editor who can take your work and say, let's make it even better and keep me in the story and let's eliminate some stuff or let's reword this and that is the one thing I will continuously preach on here is hire a good editor, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's a good tip, certainly.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay,
Well,
so thinking about, oh, go ahead.
you don't know what you don't know. So you need that
Right.
editor to tell you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't care how good you are at grammar and spelling and punctuation and that kind of thing. I think that it's always a positive thing to have somebody else's eyes on your work before you start sharing it with the world. Just even if it's one person, but I recommend more than one person. That's just me.
It's good thinking.
Yeah. I know that it's made me a better writer in the end. So thinking about reading and writing, do you write a lot of the same genres that you read? Do you write what pops into your head? Like what does your writing process look like there?
Okay. Well, one thing I try to do, especially when I'm working on a longer piece like a novel, is, I try to read the sort of thing that I'm writing, because I want to kind of keep in that zone, so I want to be reading similar things, um, trying to be conscious of, I'm not going to write a scene like this because I saw it in another book, but kind of keeping in that same feeling, you know. So if I'm writing a YA mystery, I'm probably going to be reading mysteries or other sorts of YA stories. So I keep in that same sort of groove. I love Raymond Chandler, but and I also read Mickey Spillane. Mickey Spillane writes an entirely different kind of mystery than a YA mystery might be. There's lots of stuff you would not want your teenager reading that might appear in a Mickey Spillane book. So I don't do that. Um, but a lot of times I'll have two or three books going at a time that I'm reading, and one of them might be something like a mystery. One of them might be some kind of nonfiction, like a history type of thing. I might be reading something for work that's about marketing or copywriting, that kind of thing. So some of the things that I write, especially when I'm writing short stories, they're not necessarily the kinds of stuff I pick up and read a lot. I've written some things that are a little science fiction sort of influenced. I don't really read a lot of science fiction. I love science fiction movies, but I don't read a lot of science fiction. I've read some, but not a lot. I think I'm more influenced by movies there than I am by novels. Um, so, but I do read a certain number of thrillers and that sort of thing. Uh, Paranormal stuff. A lot of my writing has some sort of paranormal angle to it. Whether it be something like UFOs or Bigfoot or ghosts or whatever. I don't read a lot of fiction of that sort, but I I love watching those shows on television about people that are out looking for Bigfoot or people that are examining UFO sightings or what have you. And I don't necessarily believe in all that stuff, but but I think it's interesting, um, the sort of fascination that some people have with that.
Oh, for sure. I read a lot of romance novels and mysteries and thrillers and suspense, and so all of those kind of combine together for me when I write things. There's usually a suspense line that kind of runs through my work. But then I started working on, and I don't read a lot of urban fantasy, but I started working on one because I just had one that popped into my head and I thought, oh, this will be fun. And so I've been working on that one. And that's a whole different level of imagination that I have to plug into sometimes. And so that's one that I'm going, this is for when I have all the free time in the world. But yeah, I'm the same way. I'm like, a lot of times what I'm reading is going to be what I'm writing, and in a lot of cases in some form or
Right.
fashion. Yeah. Definitely. So are you a plotter or a pantser?
I
Do you
am a
plot out your
pantser.
books? Me too.
Yeah. Or some people say a discovery writer.
Correct. I like the term pantser because I do. I write by the seat of my pants so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. And I have a friend that's also an author that I think he is very much a plotter. He's one of the ones with the board and all the things that he's putting on it and that kind of thing. And, you know, whatever gets you through the night, what works for you, do it that way. Because, we're all different people in our minds work different ways. So I generally have an idea of what I want to happen. I kind of know where point A is and point B is, but how we're going to get there, I kind of find out along the way. And I keep notes, and I'll go back every so often. Well, one thing I do with novels is I'll do a chapter recap. So as I'm going along, as I'm writing, I'm doing a recap of every chapter so that I can go back and refer to that. And so what chapter was it when they were at that show at the theater and the gunshot went off? Because maybe I need to go back and reference something, and I want to make sure it's consistent, But every now and then, too, I'll go back and I'll reread through all that to kind of get a picture of, okay, where do we need to go yet to get to the end? What are the loose ends that we need to tie up? And sometimes I'll sit down and I'll just make a list, here are the things that need to happen in the next few chapters, or here are the things that need to happen before we come to the end. So there's a certain amount of planning, but that outlining it all in the beginning, doing descriptions of all the characters, all that kind of stuff. No, I don't do that level of plotting.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's more fun. I think it's just an adventure for everyone. It's a surprise to me. It's a surprise to you. We'll all just get there together. I mean, I love that. And I think a lot of times it's just because it plays in my head, kind of like a movie. And then I'm like, okay, I just need to put it on paper. And then what would happen next? I don't have time to outline it because it just pops into my head so fast. And I just have to put it on the page.
Yeah, that's more my creative process too. I mean, I get the juices going, and then I see where they lead me.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, did you self-publish your collections of short stories, or did you put that through a traditional publisher?
No, I self-published those. And the reason why I did that is I actually got started writing fiction again during the pandemic, and I wasn't making my 40-minute commute to work every day. So I had a little more free time, and I thought, can I exercise those muscles a little bit? Hopefully those haven't completely atrophied. And so I started writing some things. And when I had about, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 stories done, I thought, this is beginning to look like a book, but the thing that I did know was that, well, at least I imagine no traditional publisher is going to want to publish a short story collection by an unknown author. So that might be a tough row to hoe. So that's when I started looking into self-publishing, and just from there, that's what I've been doing. I've been self-publishing the books rather than going the more traditional route with looking for an agent and a publisher and that kind of thing. You never know, that may change in the future, but that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, that's the route I took too. I did attempt I sent out query letter after query letter, and it just went on. And then the more I, started doing the research into how that process works, it could be, even if I got an agent and then it went to a publishing house kind of thing, it could still be another year or 2 years before my book ever saw the light of day. And I thought, but I have a book now. It's been with an editor. It's got a cover, all of these things. And I thought,
right,
I'm just going to pull the trigger. And that's what I did. And I have loved, if somebody wanted to take the marketing part off my plate, then by all means, I'd be like, here, let me sign this over to you. But at the same time, I love the freedom and the creativity that I get to express myself. And I know there are some cons to it. So what kind of advantages or disadvantages have you discovered along the way through the self-publishing process?
Well, one of the things that's great about self-publishing, well, you could say this is great, or you could say that it's not so great. You could say I get to do or I have to do. And but one of the things is you get to learn a lot of new things, a lot of new skills, because as you know, there's a lot more to it than just the writing. And it's, for instance, the editing process, finding somebody to edit your work for you. Maybe you want to get some beta readers. It's doing all that stuff. But even when you think you've got everything ready to go, then it's the formatting. Okay, you got to learn the formatting. You've got to decide what platform do you want to self-publish on? And I use Amazon KDP, but there are other ways to do it. And then the first book I did, I actually designed the original cover myself too. I know a lot of people that are much more talented at that than I am, but I do have, some skills from back in the day when I worked at newspapers. But, I designed the original cover. I did later on hire a professional designer to kind of clean it up, make it look a little more professional. But, and then of course you got to figure out, okay, so how do I put this up on KDP or whoever you're going to use? So there are a lot of different skills there. And then maybe you want to, you probably should have a website. Everybody says you ought to have a website. So there are better, more professional ways to do it, but I designed my own website, because a lot of this I'm trying to figure out how much of this can I do with my own skills. And of course, one of the benefits there is, it costs you less money. You can spend a lot of money putting out a book if you want to. But for me, it's, stretching those muscles. How much can I figure out how to do with my own skills? How many new skills can I learn in this process by doing this? Now, some of the downsides, like you were talking about, is you do have to learn some other things. Maybe you aren't interested in formatting the book yourself, and there are some people out there very good at it and have the software that can do some really beautiful things with formatting. Maybe you want to go that route. You don't want to be bothered with that. Maybe you don't want to be bothered with either designing a cover or looking for an artist and working with an artist. So even if you find somebody out there online or a friend that's very good at design, you're going to have to work with them. You're not going to want to just turn the whole thing over to somebody else who maybe doesn't have your vision or understand your story. But it's how much of that you can do and how much of it you're willing to do. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Untouchables with Kevin Costner, and Sean Connery asks him, "What are you prepared to do?" Everybody knows where the moonshine is, but what are you prepared to do? Are you prepared to go after those guys? If you're going to self-publish, what are you prepared to do? How much are you prepared to do?
Yeah, and it is, but there to me, I have experienced in learning how to do all of that. Several things have come from it. I feel a greater sense of accomplishment when I do figure out how to do things for myself. And so in the end, I am more motivated to do the next thing, to learn the next thing, because it shows me that I'm capable of it. I've also created this amazing network of other people who either have the skills I'm looking for or people who are looking for those skills, people with those skills, and I can connect them. And that's one thing that I think when you go into self-publishing, you need to understand it's not a Lone Ranger journey. Like you can't do it you can, I guess, do it all by yourself, but you will find so much more satisfaction and a little bit less stress if you will, create a community and a network of people that you can say, I'm not saying go make friends with everybody. I'm saying that, you support somebody, collaborate with this person, whatever, and you will find yourself sitting a little lighter at the end of the day. You're like, oh, good. That is one less thing I have to worry about. It might cost you a little extra to pay somebody to do something. I did the same thing with my cover. My first 2 books, their covers, I did it myself and I was proud of them because I did them, but they were not as professional as they could have been. And so because my first book is turning 1 in a couple of weeks, for its birthday, I'm giving it a new facelift. Like it's getting a professional facelift. And I was like, that's something that I'm proud of what's inside. Now I really want to be proud of what's outside, even more so. And so I'm paying somebody to do that. But I wouldn't have done that in the beginning because I was just ready to get it out. I was ready to put the book out there, get the story told. And so, but yeah, I think creating a network and a community as well will make your job self-publishing a whole lot simpler in the long run.
And, you get those people that you can ask questions of, how did you do this? Why did you do it that way? That kind of thing, So that's always good. It's good to have other people that you can call on and bend their ear a little bit.
But yeah, I think that's kind of the whole point of my podcast is to network creatives, because I didn't know what I was looking for when I got started. That's why I started the podcast, so that I could be like, hey, let's talk about things that I have no knowledge of, and you inform me, and then I'll inform everybody else on your behalf.
There we go.
Yeah. So, all right, let's flip the script here. You get to take over, and you get to choose the topics that we talk about for the next little while.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about the kind of things that you write and how your background or your day job, if you have one, influences that.
Okay. So my first book is the result of me having a dream and wanting to know how it ended. Like I woke up and I was like, well, I'm unsatisfied. I need to know how it ended. And so I started writing it. Now I will say, beginning to end, it's a completely different story than where it started, which is so funny because it's got similar elements, but at the same time, the more I wrote, the more I was like, oh, but let's go back and this would be even more interesting. And by the time I had a few chapters in, I was like, this is going to be a book. And I just decided it's going to be a book. And then I fell in love with it. But I've always been a writer. I've always loved writing. I've, always kept journals, always wrote bad poetry, all these things, so writing has always just been part of me. Yeah. And when I say bad, like, I mean, we'll never see the light of day kind of thing. I even rabbit trail, the Wayback Machine online, when you go to like
Oh, yeah, right,
or
right.
whatever.
Mhm,
Okay, love that sucker. I went back and I was like, I just want to see if my GeoCities website still exists somewhere in the Wayback Machine, and it does. And I am so thankful that the link to my poetry is not functional at all, because I had the audacity back in the day to think it was good and publish it, and I was like, whew, like I could not imagine that getting dug up at some point and put out there for other people to know that I wrote. Anyway, but that's a fun website to get on. But as far as like what has influenced my writing, I am a psychologist by heart, a marriage and family counselor. That was my day job for a long time. And my main character in my first two books, she has some extra perceptual skills that she uses, like to read people's body language and their
Oh,
things
uh-huh.
like that.
Mhm.
And so I use my background in psychology helped to kind of create her and develop her, but also just character development in general. Like that's my favorite part of writing, is creating characters. I don't know if I'll ever use half the characters I created, but I love writing stories about people or for people and being like, now where can I insert you into a book? And so,
Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of where that comes from and goes.
Well, there's that, I don't know if you want to say it's an argument, but that, for lack of a better word, argument about whether stories should be character driven or plot driven. And generally, what you hear people say more of is, no, they should be character driven. I guess that's more the thing that's in vogue at the moment. A lot of the time, especially when I was writing short stories, I used to think, well, this isn't so much plot driven as it's situation driven. What if this situation happened and you put someone that was more or less an average person in that situation, maybe, with some caveats, but not somebody extraordinary? What would they do? One of the stories I wrote was about a guy who is at a uh, secondhand clothing store, who buys a pair of shoes, and then the shoes take him on this adventure. The shoes want him to find out who killed their previous owner. So I guess you could say that's plot driven, but to me that's more of a situation. Okay, what if you bought a possessed pair of shoes? What would happen? And what would you do if you were the average person that got taken along for that roller coaster ride? How would you react to that? So that's more. But as I get into novels, I think it does become a little bit more about the characters. Obviously, if you're writing a mystery, that plot's a huge part of it. But there's a reason why they put people's faces on dollar bills. It's because people respond to other people. You know, People remember what portraits look like much more so than the other details on a dollar bill. And so that's why characters are really important in stories, because, we can put ourselves in their shoes. We're
Yes.
much more likely to read about characters than we are to read about geometry.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. There are several topics that subjects that you could have chosen. I've been like, well, I don't know, but yeah, geometry, forget it. But you put an interesting character in there telling me about geometry, maybe, or how they're using it to do something. Maybe I would read that. But yeah, no, I'm with you.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I assume you're probably a people watcher when you're out in public.
I am such a people watcher. Like, you just never know when you're going to land in one of my stories. We used to, I know it's pretty bad, but I think that's true for a lot of authors. Like, you have to be observational. You have to take in your surroundings, especially to be able to convey them if you're going to put them in a story and that kind of thing. But yes, people watching. I mean, our first dates before, when my husband and I first got married, before we could afford to do anything else, we'd go to the mall and sit across from the escalator and eat cookies and stare and watch people and make up stories about them. I mean, it was one of those things that we did. And so I love watching people. People probably think I'm weird and creepy because I'll sit there and just stare at them and just watch. But I'm like, I'm fascinated by people. They drive me crazy too, but I'm fascinated by them.
You have to be a little more careful about that when you're a guy, because it can come off creepy. You got to be a little more careful about how you're watching people and whether they're going to think you're staring at them or whatnot. But we went to a marching band festival over the weekend, and we were arriving kind of in the middle, and as one of the bands were coming out, they'd already competed, and so it's just the kids streaming out. They're not marching out or anything, but here are all these teenage boys singing Careless Whisper at the top of their lungs, And I thought, I have got to figure out a way to use that in a story. Just some little bit of the passing parade. Because that's not the kind of thing you could make up, and it's something you observe.
And how teenage boyish, like you could write story after story about, or just even insert teenage boys into your story, and it would be the most entertaining thing ever. And they have no idea how absolutely ridiculous they are.
Well, we my youngest daughter, all my kids are grown now, but my youngest daughter had a friend that lived about a block away. And when he was in high school, I used to drive him to school in the morning, and almost without fail, he would show up at our house in short pants. It didn't make any difference what the weather was. Okay. And if he would show up in long pants, we knew, it must be a blizzard out. He's got long pants on. And his name was Jeremy. So we actually called that the gerometer. What's the gerometer say today? Is he wearing short pants or long pants? So, that's another kind of thing you could work into a story someplace.
Everybody would know. Everybody would understand. That is such a teenage boy thing to do, because we live in Alabama, where summertime, you're talking, 103 on a good day in July kind of thing. It's hot, but we have a friend whose 13-year-old son wears a hoodie every single day. Every single day. I'm going, how are you not dying?
Okay. I do see, I see kids walking home from school sometimes wearing a hoodie, and maybe it started in the morning in the 50s and it's like 80 and they're still wearing the hoodie. I'm not sure what that's about. Or I used to see girls do this all the time, teenage girls, like at softball games. My youngest daughter played softball for many years. This thing where they put their arms inside the hoodie, but they won't pull it up over their head. Have you seen that? I don't know. Maybe you did that when you were younger. And nope. I even posted on Facebook about that. What is that? Why do they do that? The best answer I could get was they don't want to mess up their hair. But I don't think that's it. I'm not really sure what it is. But, that's one of the things about people, is that they're somewhat mysterious. And that's what makes them fascinating.
Yes.
Especially as an adult looking back at kids or teenagers, or, in my case, being a guy, and, I don't want to paint with broad strokes, but there are things that you ladies do differently than we do, that we don't understand. And, but that's part of what makes the other gender fascinating. At least I think so. You observe and you try to put that in your writing.
Right. But at the same time, what's really crazy and cool about just mankind in general is that we have a lot of the same. There's a reason that you can say this person has this disorder, and it doesn't matter which gender they are because they have all the same characteristics. Or, this is part of human behavior. And that's one of the things. I have a short little, well, it's got several episodes on YouTube of, psychology and writing, and using these psychological topics, like narcissism. You're going to see the same characteristics in a narcissist regardless of what gender they are in a lot of ways. Now, they might come out a little bit different because we use different wiles as men and women kind of thing to get our way, but we all have very similar behaviors that we can attribute to all people. That's a broad stroke, like you said, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we all have similar characteristics in a lot of ways. And so your characters need to be human. And then you give them their little quirks, like how they wear hoodies in 100-degree weather or shorts in 20-degree weather. Yeah. It's pretty fun.
Now, is there anything particularly psychologically that you've used in your writing, like a particular diagnosis or anything for a character?
Ooh, that is a good question. I didn't really so the girl, the female main character in the first two books, she ends up being like a consultant for the FBI. And so she's helping use body language and facial expressions. And she even has the ability in some cases, like a sense of touch will give her, like maybe send off some warning bells in her mind kind of thing that says, hey, there's something not quite right here. And so she was using her skills more to, solve crimes and break through liars, or just to pick up on, hey, I'm hiding something, that kind of thing. So I haven't given anybody a specific diagnosis yet, because that's kind of one of those things that people get a little sensitive about when you write about them. And like, I could do it justice. I could write it from the textbook and from the experiential point of view. But people tend to be like, oh, you're stereotyping and this, that, and the other. And so, I haven't gotten into that yet.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. One of the characters, one of the main characters in the book that I have out now, it is a young lady that's mixed race, and I'm not. I'm, Mr. Mayonnaise white guy. But I wanted to make sure that I was handling that in the right way. So I actually did seek out a sensitivity editor to read the book, to especially keep an eye on those sorts of things. And she gave me some good tips. She gave me some pointers and some things that I did change in the way that I was writing. I'd done some research online beforehand to try to be sensitive. One of the things that I read multiple times is, do not use food to describe the character of someone's skin. Like chocolate or like nutmeg, or these different things that you may think that's a beautiful color, and you may be trying to paint that beautiful picture, but there's something dehumanizing about using food, for instance, to describe someone. So that's not something I would have thought of in advance, but it was something that I tried to avoid. And then also, too, if you're going about giving this sort of physical description of someone who's a person of color, you should be doing the same thing with your other major characters, too. I mean, because we're not all alike. We have different color hair, we have different complexions, that sort of thing. We have different ethnic backgrounds. And as you can work that into your writing without doing a big data dump, that's a good thing to do too. So wanted to be sensitive and found somebody that could help me do that. And so maybe in some of the other books on down the line, I may try to create or write other characters who have experiences that are somewhat different than mine. And again, seek out somebody that has that and see if they can, because you do want to be sensitive. Obviously someone who's writing a story from the point of view of a teenager who's mixed race, someone who is mixed race could write that story a lot better than I could. But I might want to at least represent that kind of person in the world I'm writing about, because that's the way the world is, and you want everyone to feel comfortable in the world that you're creating.
Absolutely. And I think it is very important. It just goes back to, do your best to avoid stereotyping people in general. That's in life in general. Don't go around just assuming what you know about somebody, because you don't know the person, or if you do know the person, that's different. But like just somebody you just met, don't assume because of what they look like, or, because of what's sitting in front of them, on their plate, or the book in their hand, whatever the case may be. Don't just assume that you know them. If you saw my Kindle library, and then you saw the books that I write, and then you see the books that I, talk about, and the places that I go, like, you get a weird pit. You'd be like, wow, you are very diverse in your taste. And I'd be like, yeah, I am. Like, I have a very diverse palette when it comes to books and reading and writing and that kind of thing. But you can't just assume that by talking to me unless I tell you those things. So just because I write this one kind of book doesn't mean that I won't read elements of something else in a different kind of book. So you can't just assume about people. And that's true about your characters. Don't just assume because you've decided you wanted to make a character Black. Like, don't just assume that you know how to write that character. Go find you a sensitivity reader. Did you have one, like somebody that you knew, or did you go seeking a sensitivity reader?
Well, I sought somebody out online that, along with doing beta reading and some other things, provides that service.
Okay.
So
you just threw it out there and like, hey, I need this.
And I looked around through various people that to try to find somebody that I thought would be a good fit for the characters that I was writing, and then communicated with her a little bit, and seemed like, yeah, that would be a good match. And she gave me a few tips here and there that weren't at all having to do with sensitivity reading. I had one of the one of the girls refer to another one of the girls as Miss Dirty Dancing. And my sensitivity reader had a note out in the margin: what century is this? So we came up with something a little more contemporary to say other than Dirty Dancing. Showing my age a little bit there.
Right. Oh my gosh. And that is something else you kind of have to watch out for. It's like,
oh, definitely.
I sent my kid, do you remember back in the 90s? It's not that long ago, but like there was a commercial. It was a Doritos commercial where the guy's like, this is my crystal ball, and the guy's like, that looks like a snow globe. His coworker says, it looks like a snow globe, and he says, no, watch this, will there be free Doritos today or something? And like, he chunks it at the vending machine and breaks the window, and that's how he gets his free Doritos. Okay, so I sent that to my kid, and she goes, the 90s must have been a really weird place to grow up. And I was like, it was the best. I loved it. Like, it was a great commercial. See, that was what I did too. It's a great commercial.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to ask, so with your background in marketing, this is something that just popped into my head a minute ago, and I'm glad I remembered to bring it up. How do you market your books? Like, is that something that just comes naturally to you, or are you finding book marketing different from like the marketing that you do on a daily basis?
Well, I'll tell you what, it might be like that expression that a lawyer represents himself as a fool for a client. You've heard that. Yeah, so I can't say that I'm great at marketing my books. I think a lot of it's just trial and error. You've got to figure out what works for you. I find I generally do better if, for instance, I can get in front of a person and really, do something like a book reading. Usually when I do something like that, people are interested and they buy the book. I haven't had a lot of luck with Amazon ads or with advertising on Facebook. I haven't had a lot of luck with those. I've used some of the services. I haven't used BookBub. It's kind of hard to get a BookBub deal, but some of the other services like that have the lists that they send out to people's emails that promote different books. I've used some of those pretty successfully. But I think the big thing with marketing books and marketing yourself as an author, that one of the things that's a big adjustment for me is that it's, playing the long game.
Yeah.
You have to do a lot of things that you probably aren't going to see any immediate return on.
Definitely.
I have a YouTube channel. I produce videos I put out on YouTube to support my book writing efforts. But, I can't really say that I've ever put one out and the next week I saw a whole bunch of sales online. But they're probably contributing long term, So you have to play that long game and look for a lot of ways to, just get yourself out in front of people, get your books out in front of people, and hope that pays off in the end. The email services, I have had a certain amount of success with those. Those have been a good way to market ebooks. As far as the print copies, the best thing I've had luck with is getting in front of people and either talking to them about the book or hopefully having an opportunity to read the book. So I've done some of those, and pretty much anyone who's interested in hearing about something I've written, I'm willing to talk to.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, it's been a year, and like a week, it will have been a year since the first book came out. And it's not been until like probably month 9 that I started seeing, a steady increase. And that's because I had to find my people. I had to find what worked for me, what I was comfortable with, and do all of these things. But it's a grind. Like, it is a constant, you have to do the footwork, because if you don't share it, nobody's going to know about it, because Amazon is massive, right? Barnes and Noble is massive. Even if you were traditionally published, you would still have to talk about and tell people about your book, because they're not just going to stumble. They might, very rarely will they just stumble on it one day and be like, oh, this is the best author ever, and then read all of your books from that point forward. And so, yeah, you have to be able to be willing to put in the footwork, and that has definitely been a lesson in self-publishing for sure.
It's not like a needle in a haystack. It's like a needle in a haystack of needles.
Right.
Exactly. And trying to have people find your particular needle. Yeah. So it's a tough go.
It is. It's a challenge. But again, it can be done, and you can learn how to do it, and you can find people to help you do it. You don't have to do it by yourself. So, but I was just wondering if there were any, specific tactics that you employed that it was like, all right, now grace us with your wisdom, marketing guru.
Well, I have read other people say this, and so I can't take full credit, but it goes back to knowing your market. It depends a little bit about what your goal is. Is your goal to write and publish books because you enjoy that and you have a certain vision and you want to share it with the world? Or is your goal to be, rich and famous and sell a lot of books? If you want to sell a lot of books, what you really need to do is get out there and research your market and make sure there are people that are interested in reading the particular kind of book that you want to write. And that's not what everyone wants to do. A lot of people want to write the sort of book that they would enjoy reading, that they feel good writing. And that's one goal. If you want to sell a lot of books, well, it's like making cars. What sort of cars do people want to buy? You need to figure out what they want to buy, and you need to create that, and then you need to communicate to that audience, in a voice that's going to resonate with them.
Yes. And that's the hardest part. That was the hardest part starting out for me. Not the hardest, but that was a very hard part for me, was figuring out who was my target audience, because I am one of those people that I'll read just about anything. And so I just assume that everybody will read just about everything. And so I'll market to everybody, but you can't. It's too expensive. Right. But then you're just not going to be effective. You're going to be wasting resources if you try to market to everybody.
Well, one thing you can do too is say, for instance, like I'm writing YA mystery. Go to some place like Amazon or Barnes and Noble or what have you, and look for those kind of books and read the book descriptions, and not so much necessarily talking about keywords. I mean, that's a whole different topic. But what are some of the words that they're using in their book descriptions, books that are selling well? Because there are particular words that they may use over and over again, like secret, lies, reveal, just different words like that that then if you use that in your book description, when someone reads it, who has been reading One of Us is Lying, or Dead Girls Can't Tell Secrets, or whatever the book is, they see those similar sorts of words being used in your book description, they're going to get that sort of feeling that, oh, this is the book I want to read. This is the book for me. It may have nothing to do with the content of your description, but you're using those sorts of words that are even subconsciously flags to them,
Ooh, that's a good one. And it will also bring you up in, if you liked this, you might like this. And so because it takes those keywords and kind of says, oh, these are similar authors based on.
One thing that Blake Snyder wrote about in his book, Save the Cat, which is about screenwriting, that whole idea of, for instance, I sometimes tell people my new book is Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew meets Scooby-Doo meets Riverdale. That shorthand form of describing what your book is about. It may be, well, it's Gone with the Wind, set in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, for instance, if you're writing historical fiction. That somebody says, oh, well, that sounds interesting. I would be interested in that, or it's the Battle of the Bulge set in outer space, so it's like the Battle of the Bulge meets Star Wars or whatever, Yeah,
no, that makes perfect sense. And that's a great way to kind of to put out there your work, because I immediately knew when you were like Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Scooby, like all of those things, I know exactly what you're talking about. In Riverdale, then you brought them together. No, that makes perfect sense. I was doing a voiceover for a comic book. She one of my yeah, it was pretty cool. She wanted me to do a voiceover for it, and she was like, okay, so it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Resident Evil meets, and I was like listing all these things, and I was like, oh, well, I know exactly what your comic book is about, and I've never read it, like I've never picked it up. And I was like, that's great, I know exactly what that's about. And so yes, I don't know why, like I can hear people tell me what their stuff is about like that, but why haven't I done that for myself? So guess what I'm doing this afternoon?
There you go. Okay.
You've saved the day. Perfect. Okay. I know that our time here is coming to a close. So tell listeners how they can connect with you and your work.
All right. Well, my website is rjpostauthor.com. Yes, rjpostauthor.com. All one word, rjpostauthor.com. And then I'm also on Facebook and YouTube. So go to either one of those and just search for RJ Post Author. You'll find me there. And my books are all available on Amazon. So the first one is Lion Taming, Dating, and Other Dangerous Endeavors. The second one is Tasmanian Tigers, True Love, and Other Elusive Things. Those are the two short story collections. And the current novel is Phantoms in the Fieldhouse.
Love those titles. That is fantastic. If nothing else, somebody might pick it up just because the titles are so just like, let me just grab you by the hair and show you. That's so funny. Yeah. I love it. All of that is going to be in the show notes. So it's going to be as simple as you click a button and it'll take you to where you need to go to connect with RJ and his work. All right. Are you ready for your big question? You've had all this time to think about it. All right, here we go. What is the one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else today?
Okay, this one's easy for me. One of the other things I do is I sing in a men's choir at my church. And I had a friend there, this gentleman named John Schroll, and he was in the men's choir. And he said to me one day, he said, we hear you singing over there in the pew. Why don't you come over and sing with us? You're singing anyway. You might as well come over and sing with us. But the thing that he said was, don't worry that your voice isn't good enough. The voice God gave you is good enough, or he would have given you another voice. So don't worry that whether you want to write or you want to paint or you want to sing, or I knew a lady that made bird baths out of things like bowls and stuff. Whatever your thing is, don't worry that you're not good enough to do it. Just go ahead and do it, because the one thing that you can add to your book or your song or your sculpture, whatever it is your voice. No one else can add that.
I got chills on that one. That was good. And and that's the show, folks. Like that is the truth. That is the God's honest truth, that you are given a story, you are given a voice, use it, because nobody else has it. It was given to you for a reason. Oh, that's good.
That's right.
That's good. RJ, thank you so much. I loved it. It was all over the place. And at the same time, I think that we hit it out of the park in so many different places. And so thank you for just taking the time to share with us today and just getting to know you. It's been a blast.
Well, thanks. I really enjoyed it.